Hey guys, welcome to this awesome roundtable experience. We've got Richard Harleman from Over on the Wild Side who's joining us today. And Richard has been on the channel before and he talked to us about his background and his interests and things. And we just touched barely on his off grid living. And this time, thank God he's coming back because he's actually going to talk to us more about the off grid lifestyle, but also his approach to taking history and contemporary living, blending the two and getting the most out of it. So, Richard, man, I appreciate you coming back on, brother.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
So, those of you who are joining us, this is live, which is pretty cool. We're going to save all of the questions until the very, very end, and we'll leave about 15 minutes of that for you to answer anything that needs to be done. And we appreciate any comments and questions that you guys have. That way, I can field it with Richard. So, Richard, getting started, man, getting started. Now, the last time we interviewed, you said you were into living history and in high school and then college and things like that. And we did a deep dive into that. But now at your point in life, you're taking history and you're blending it with contemporary lifestyle. I'm not saying you're living like a king with all the comforts of a home, but actually vice versa. You are taking the best parts of both worlds and blending them. What's your journey there? Like, how did you get started in that direction for those of us who may not want to go all the way, but at least start possibly figuring out a way to blend both?
Oh, well, I always say simplification is the first step, like minimizing, simplifying. That's reducing what we do is huge and took a long time for me to figure out because I was probably worse than most. I envied a friend of mine who, when we were all, a bunch of us were living together as roommates and we all had to move out. And one of my friends, he just had like a suitcase and a mattress. And I was so envious of him. That was years ago. It's taken me. I'm still trying to reduce down. I'd like to be able to just like live out of my car and be fine, or like live out of my camp. But anyway, that's my point. Mainly reducing. It's amazing how much we think we need in normal life, and then little by little, I've just been getting rid of more things. Like it just pop in my mind. Do I really need that? And then not like I'm going to try to go without it, but then the challenge is presented in my mind, and then I pursue it. And so uh, that's how it works for me. I keep cutting more and more out of my life.
Now, you used a key word there. You said challenge, and there's a theme in a lot of your videos on your channel that you approach going outdoors as a challenge. Now, were you always adventurous like that?
Uh, I think so. To me, I'm just normal, but I've got enough feedback from people over the years that I guess by some people's standards, I'm pretty adventurous. Some people have even said I have a lot of courage, and I've never accused myself of that. But uh, yeah, I think when it was mainly my brother. I'm the youngest of three kids, and my brother is the middle, and he's about a year and a half older than me. And so he was the adventurous one. He always was coming up with ideas, and then me and my friend would just do whatever my brother came up with. And looking back, we did all kinds of crazy stuff, and a lot of kids, I guess they didn't. Um, and so I don't know. Yeah, I guess so. My dad was quite adventurous.
uh, so you've always been that way, or at least you had a natural tendency for that. So I am not all that adventurous, to be honest. Like I have to have some type of motivation to get me there. What kind of suggestions would you have for someone like me to help us push ourselves a little bit further, maybe out of our comfort zone? That way, we can experience things. Um, that we may be a little bit hesitant to do. Now, I give the viewers a few examples. Now, I've seen you start off light, where maybe not all that light, but it was in the early spring, and you decided to try to transition yourself to the cold. So you dunked yourself in your long johns into your freezing creek. And I remember a couple videos where you went out overnight and you're trying to figure out your bedding system and you're trying to figure out your tarp and tenting system, and it got down in the single digits. So what suggestions would you have for someone who may not like want to go all the way there all at once, but to transition into that kind of direction so that they can challenge themselves and grow and improve themselves?
Yeah, I believe in the baby steps. Like that's been huge for me, as sissy as that sounds. But okay. Well, I like to say this. I used to watch outdoor videos. Recently when I was getting back into this lifestyle from my anyway, uh, I'd sit inside with a storm outside. I was inside my teepee, but I was nice and warm by a fire and plenty of firewood, watching this guy doing videos, thinking to myself, man, why don't I do that? And I couldn't barely get myself to go outside in the cold. And and so then when I started thinking, okay, I am going to do this, I'm going to start making videos. There's that pressure that we get that we put on ourselves. I believe this is common, so I'm speaking to it. That we believe we have to go out and do it the way that we see it done. We see people, whether it's on videos or whether it's guys that we meet who brag about how great their camp life has always been all their life, how easy it is for them, which is a lot of bragging. But so we put all this pressure on ourselves that if we're not that, then we're not doing it right, or that we're not man enough. Maybe we're not that blatantly, calling ourselves out that blatantly, but we just feel like we don't add up. And so finally, I was sitting in my shed, my cabin, and I just kind of threw that off my shoulders and decided, you know what, I'm just going to do whatever I want. And uh, and that's why, like a couple of those camps that you mentioned, where they were just like a couple hundred yards off my property, and so that way, when I guess I did stay out on those the whole night, but I decided to myself, you know what? I'm just going to make coffee in the morning. I'm not going to cook breakfast. I'm just going to wake up, make coffee, and go home. And you know, screw any outside standard that I'm going to put on myself. And I mean, we got to challenge ourselves, but it's okay to do it little by little. I guess is the point. Whether it's like there's a whole lot of people who can get in the water a lot better than I do, and so it's kind of like that attitude of, well, I can't do what they're doing, so I shouldn't even bother. Instead, well, I'm just doing it my way, little by little, and you just got to tell yourself that's okay. Take control of your own life. That's the beginning.
What's your approach to setting goals and approaching those goals and achieving those goals?
Funny you should ask. I don't do that anymore. I quit. I grew up religious, and man, they like to put a lot of pressure on you. At least for me, that was my experience. Always, oh, you have to have goals. You have to have, you have to meet this standard by this time in your life. Man, I wish I would have not listened to all that. I don't set goals. I have ideas and visions of what I would like, but the funny thing is, what I have found in my life is I don't know enough to know what's best for me. And so, why am I going to set this goal when, like, let's say I set a goal for a year. 3 months into it, I realized, you know what, that was an ill-informed goal that I set, and now I'm going to go off in this direction. So if I'm holding myself to that goal, then I'm not freeing myself to go in the direction that I'm learning. So, in other words, every day I'm learning and growing more. And so, why should I make a decision now that in a year I have to hold to when in 3 months I'm going to know a lot more than I know right now? Hope that's not too confusing.
No, I don't think so. Would you say that your vision, in a way, uh, uh, not to get into philosophy or anything, but would you say that your vision really is a goal? Like you are wanting to acclimate yourself to cold weather, so that's a goal, right? And you baby stepped it, and like you said, I remember several videos. You're very honest with your viewers, which I love your integrity because you tell them straight up, especially at the end, like, well, I wasn't able to stay out this whole night because it got so cold, or something happened to the dogs, or the coyotes came around, and I was afraid they were going to eat my horse or something. Um, but there's this your vision, at least from your series that I've seen, uh, you did your baby steps and then you would alter it, right? So you still achieved your vision or goal. Would you say
Right.
that those are about the same?
Yeah, very similar. It's just that I've had training, like I did this personal development training when I was still a realtor, and they were hyper focused on goals. And so to me, there's a lot of baggage, or I to me, in the culture of goal setting, it's like something more specific, where you set a goal and then you clarify steps that you're going to take. Um, mini goals, many or smaller goals that set you up to achieve that goal, where it's kind of a formal process. So that's kind of the difference that I'm making versus like, oh, hey, we got cold weather coming up. Um, and all of a sudden in my mind, I start thinking, hey, I could set up a tent. I could go out there and experiment with a tarp tent, make the best out of this. Um, yeah, I'm going to do that. And then I go out and try it. And, I mean, I was ready there. If it didn't work as well as it did on those first ones, I would have just given up and sat by the stove. Um, So it's more like just, hey, I could try this kind of an approach that I have, and rather than this is my goal, like in weightlifting, that's very well known for you set goals. Like my goal is, I don't even know the weight, 800 pounds. So I'm gonna start with benching I don't know, deadlift, I guess, my body weight, and then when I can do that, I'm gonna increment of 25 pounds or something. However they do it, it's very much about goals versus, like I say, I just get an idea, and go out and try it. I guess overall, I want to do cold acclimation, but I don't like say within 2 years I want to be able to stand outside in 0 degrees for 30 minutes. I mean, I don't set that kind of thing. I'd probably progress more if I did that.
I got you. I think I understand. I think we're speaking the same language, and there's definitely in the corporate world this whole idea with like smart goals and everything's broken up and micromanaged and things like that. But I think I feel what you're saying. Your vision is what guides you, and if you don't necessarily achieve your vision, it's not going to impact you in a negative way. Whereas a goal, because of the weight of it, you can feel like a failure. Am I putting words in your mouth? But is that kind of what you're saying? Like the weight of goals?
Yeah, well, I don't want to. Yeah, I mean, there's probably some pressure about the failure. There's a lot of that kind of pressure. More of this comes from my philosophy of intuitive living that I'm working on, that I've seen lived out, and that is something that I'm trying to develop. So it's more like, I think mainly the big difference is the freedom to be able to learn and adjust and course correct, you might call it. Where tomorrow this experience that I'm gonna do. So I get an idea in my mind. I go out and try it. now I'm a new person from that experience. And so now I'm going to have I'm going to have more experience to make my next move, which I didn't have when I started and might have made my goal. So I have to stick rigidly to that goal because I set it up as a goal rather than, hey, tomorrow, the experiences I go through today make me a new person tomorrow. And therefore, tomorrow I know better about the next direction to take than I do right now.
All right, I think I got you. So let's switch gears a little bit. Your vision of his historical camping, historical adventure mixed with contemporary camping and contemporary outdoor adventure. Where do you find the balance between those two?
Still finding it, I guess. So the historical, I guess what you could say what limits me on the historical is uh, time and money. I guess the reigning principle in my life is simplicity and efficiency. And the Victorian times were not that. They were actually opposite that. Mark Twain called it the Gilded Age. And, you know, Gilded is kind of like Las Vegas, where things are for show. You can go down there and see incredibly impressive looking buildings. And when you find out how they're made, they're like a Hollywood set essentially, not quite as simplistic as that, but you know, the Gilded Age. It was very phony, but very elaborate and showy. And so that's where me, my personal convictions and my Old West passion kind of diverge at that point because um, I'm not into the Victorian philosophy, although I do love a lot of the aesthetic, obviously. But so I guess, and that's kind of what I'm dealing with right now. Like the historical has been incredible for me to focus and and to have kind of a guide, a vision, and a guide to guide me and keep me focused. But now that I've been doing it for a long time, like I say, I find ways to simplify my life that kind of diverges from that, like clothing. Like clothing is a great example. The the Old West clothing is Victorian era clothing, which is very complicated, very showy. And the best example that I have is the vest. So like these modern vests, even though it's like a old West style, but it's a modern vest. It's the same material front and back, and I like that. It's consistent. And if it was wool, I've got a wool vest that's modern and it's wool all the way around. Whereas Victorian era, the vest was just for dress, and so the front was wool, and then the back is paper thin cotton. And that was really annoying on one of my recent camp trips because I was really cold and I could feel it on my back. And so that kind of thing, I just don't like that. I love it as far as like the aesthetic, and I appreciate Victorian era. But that's just a great example of how like the clothing and we kind of diverge there.
Okay, so actually, you beat me to the punch. I was going to ask you about clothing. Why did you why do you consistently dress like this? If this was an aesthetic, or if there is actual benefits from it for you. So could you explain the benefits?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that was an example of like true Victorian era clothing. As far as like this is like my modern. This might not look modern to other people. But this is modern. Um, I'm planning to go to town tomorrow, and this is basically how I dress. Like wool, I love natural fibers, and obviously back then they had natural fibers. I don't believe they had any polyester yet. Um, but so I love wearing wool, natural fibers. I love vests. I love the look of them. I love the pockets and the practicality, especially if you're in your car or on a horse and you got your stuff in your pockets. Um, And bandana is great. It keeps a shirt's expensive and hard to come by when you got a nice one, and the neck gets dirty really fast. So wearing a bandana is a practical thing for that. It's also warmer, and if I get warm, then while I'm wearing it, I can loosen it up so it's not quite so tight. And a lot of people say that there's a lot of practical purposes to wearing a bandana, but I wear one every day. I rarely ever use it for anything besides um, besides just being warm and keeping my collar off the greasy neck. Uh, I've tried getting it wet and keeping me cool, that way. But that's more of an old lifestyle.
So your off-grid life, you got a couple animals around your farm, or I don't know if it's a farm, if I could call it that, but you've got a couple animals that's everywhere. And you last year, might have been the year before, but I think it was last year, where again you did a series on meat preservation. Now, did you originate that idea out of necessity, or was it an idea from something that you learned again from history, or is this more of a contemporary thing to deal with the off grid living lifestyle that you're trying to accomplish?
Oh yeah. So mostly that was just me wanting to be simple and so getting rid of refrigeration means how am I going to deal with this meat? And drying is the easiest way. I'm in a very arid climate, so drying is very easy to do and easy to store. And then as I was doing that, then I ran across references like one guy, can't remember who wrote it, but they were traveling across I think on the Oregon Trail, and he talked about how out there they could keep meat fresh for months or weeks, 6 weeks maybe it was, 2 months. Um, where back east and in most of Europe, especially England, where a lot of our people came from, it's very humid, and so back east, so they have to do things like dry aging, where they grow a protective mold on it to keep it from going bad, and stuff like that. So when they came out here, they started to notice that the meat just stays good. But that wasn't like what gave me the vision. It was more that I was just trying to preserve meat. And I'd watched Townsend's and all of his techniques are originated back east, like I say, in Europe, and so they're very laborious, intensive. I tried to do salt for a while, but then you got to buy something, and so I'm trying to cut out everything that I can that I have to buy. So again, that's why I went to drying, and um, and so yeah, the techniques out here are just different from what they did back east. So it was more out of wanting to live a simple lifestyle, but that happens to fit in with. Well, actually, I haven't run across a lot of references of people using dried meat, to be honest. I don't know that it's actually. I might be making my own reenactorism with that.
So just a reminder, so this is live, and we're going to ask Richard some questions. So if you have a particular question or something that you want to know from Richard, then by all means, please leave a comment as we go on. And towards the end, we'll go ahead and uh, field those questions for Richard. So, yeah, when you, or actually, what is your process when the meat thing was just happenstance? It sounds like it was just accidental. When you live out in the middle of nowhere and you're trying to live this simplistic life, and you have some guiding principles. Can you tell us where some of those guiding principles come from and how we could possibly utilize some of those guiding principles in our lives to simplify it, but especially in the outdoor adventure world? What are some tools that you've learned or methods that you've learned for processing information or guiding the direction that you want to go with your lifestyle?
Oh, that's a tough question to answer. It's a good question. but it's a tough one to answer. I think that my main one is that I crave simplicity and efficiency, and so uh, I guess okay. So there's this book that I've got that I love to tell people about. There was a guy that one of the first of three white men to come to my valley, and he wrote about his travels. And somehow, when I was reading about it, he did things like when he was young, because he came here when he was like 18 or 19 or 20, because he came with his older brother and another guy. And and he did things that were just kind of silly. Like he wanted to go to a dance, and it was a two days ride, and it was New Year's Eve dance. So, the dead of winter into the mountains. Well, he started feeling lonely and decided, like, last minute, hey, I want to go to that dance. So he made it in a day. He forgot to take a coat. He forgot. Uh, and so, and he rushed and he made it to the dance and he was frozen, but he was really glad he went. And it's a great story to read about. And so that I give that as an example of how a lot of his travels were. Obviously, I think eventually he got a lot more competent, but he did a lot of that kind of stuff. And I'd read about that thinking, man, he's not encumbered like we are. I got into backpack camping when I lived in Seattle. I'll always be grateful to my friend who got me into that. But nonetheless, if I remember right, my pack was 55 pounds. And I just think back to that and think, my goodness, I could have done that with probably 20 pounds or 25 pounds. So I guess that created the vision or the idea. And I think it's a lot of that's just my propensity towards simplicity and my craving for simplicity. And so that's kind of the thing that guides me. And and so when I go out, it's on my mind. I guess I'm just always challenging. Do I actually need that? Like there's so much talk about axes, and yet I've done most of my camping without an axe because usually if you can't break it with your leg for firewood, you can just drag it onto the fire and just keep shoving it in. So you don't need anything to cut firewood. Honestly, most of my camp trips, I don't even use my knife. No way I'm going to go without a knife, though. But I just don't get a lot of the camping mentality of having all this crap that you don't use. And funny enough, somebody even made fun of me on a comment somewhere saying, "Oh, this guy doesn't even carry an axe or tools." Um, I don't want to watch him. Well, okay, that's fine. Go watch the guys that are weighed down with a bunch of stuff that they don't really even need. It's kind of funny that bushcraft. I love bushcraft. I like the idea of it, but it's just once you carry a tarp, all of a sudden, almost all that goes out the door. I mean, you gather firewood with your hands. You set up a shelter with a tarp, cut one stick for the pole or a couple sticks, and bring your cooking equipment. And then bushcraft, then at that point, is really just for fun. I mean, I didn't get into it that way. It's just kind of what I discovered along the way. Also, maybe I'm kind of lazy in that guy. I don't know. I hope that answers what you're asking.
Yeah, that was actually a great answer. That was a great answer. I am one of those guys I think who overpack even today. This mentality of you always have to be prepared. It's always with me, and I struggle sometimes, especially going by myself. Now, in scouting, you got the buddy system. I know you do a lot of like all of your camping is pretty much alone with some dogs, and I know you're actually trying to, or you were, I think, trying to teach your dogs how to carry some of your weight. If I remember right, is that right?
I might have mentioned it years ago, but no, I haven't really mentioned that.
Okay. But,
I think I did. I was just frustrated though.
so in scouting, how you're supposed to have like a buddy system, and when I'm camping with a buddy, like not both of us don't really need a large first aid kit,
Hmm.
so we can like break up the weight, and it certainly makes it easier. Going individual when I'm actually doing like an overnight hike or a day hike by myself, when I'm just doing training, I tend to overpack because I don't have that buddy with me who's loaded down. And yeah, it's a constant struggle. So this leads me to my other question: vintage gear versus contemporary gear. In all honesty, if you besides your experimentation, what do you actually prefer, vintage gear or contemporary gear?
Yeah, good one. Let's see. I got this. This one's a great example. So this is a stainless steel coffee pot, but it's kind of pretty much designed like an old tin one, and that's one that I'd love to use tin, and eventually, if I come into some money, I'll get a good tin setup. I mean, I have a bigger one, but that's my small personal one for trips. And stainless steel just makes so much sense. I mean, there's certain things that we've developed that you just can't beat. And stainless steel, I mean, you can beat it with titanium, I suppose. I don't have any titanium stuff, but from what I understand, it's just as heat resistant and it's lighter weight and just as durable, from my understanding. And so, but the point is, none of the old stuff competes with um, with stainless steel because you can just put it right in the fire, right on coals. I've ruined a couple of tin pots because I don't have firewood that creates coals around here. That's something I mention fairly regularly. And so all I can do is cook over an open flame. And some people say they cook over a flame, but the, as far away as I'd have to put it and then wait an hour for it to boil, that's just not my thing. I'd rather it boils in 5 minutes, and I can do that with pan with stainless steel. So as soon as I can, if you can set it right in the coals, then all of a sudden your cooking gear is reduced. You don't have to hardly bring anything. Um, Same goes with at this point my actual fire setup is a grate. I don't have the perfect one. I want to get one that's about 2.5 or 3 inches wide by about 8 to 10 inches long. Um, eight eight is my plan because I'm going to make a bag where it fits in sideways. So just 3 by 8 because you can always find rocks, and if you can't find rocks, you can find green wood. And if you don't want to use green wood, you can also usually just dig out or build up a mound of dirt, and then lay that grate across. And now you got something to hold um, your pot off of the fire because it's got to have air. If you put it right on the coals, then a lot of times it just puts it out because it snuffs it out essentially, or it keeps it from burning really well. So that's what I've reduced my setup to. It went from, I don't have it handy, but a fold up one. It's a modern thing. It's $8, but it folds up so you can put a fire under it and have a grate. But then I started to realize I don't even need that. I only need that grate, and a little bit wider would be nice in case I can't find perfect rocks that are flat. Um, and I need a little bit more of a span because I've also learned that the easiest way is to just cook with twigs, um, unless I'm trying to cook unless I'm trying to heat myself. But just cook, um, just cooking with twigs is excellent. I did it all year in 2022. Well, I say all year, the whole year that I lived outside, in between the rainy seasons. I cooked right through the summer, even when it was 100 degrees out. I figured that out. So my point is that's two examples of where it's so simple to use modern metal that I want to do it. Now, here's a funny one. Okay, on the other end of things, I'm setting up. modern. I was setting up a modern camp set that I could go super minimal because like a sleeping bag, my sleeping bag is a zero down bag. I've used it a ton of times. It's an excellent bag. It weighs I think 4 pounds, maybe three and a half, and then oh shoot, what was I gonna say? Um, oh yeah. So I was gonna get a modern tarp where my canvas tarp weighs about 5 pounds. It's a 7x8, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm gonna go on this ultralight kit that I want to set up, and with my sleeping bag, and then I'm gonna get a really light tarp. I think they weigh 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds for a, I forget all the terminology. Um, Poly still, they got some word for it. But anyway, what I found out was they are not good for fires, that they get holes in them really easy. And so that's where, by thinking it over, looking it over, I decided not to go with a modern tarp, even though it would save me 3 pounds, because it's too important to me to have that fire right at my entrance, as you can see in a lot of my thumbnails, because it's so easy to stay warm setting up some slanted version of a tarp tent and then the fire right in front of me. And when I do that correctly, I can be in a t-shirt in 30-degree weather. But if I have a tarp where I can't get where it gets holes in it way too easy from fire, then I'm not gonna take that risk. So that's where I've decided, in my opinion, um, uh, the canvas tarp makes more sense. So more of the old fashioned in that regard to me takes over. Same with the clothes as far as like the natural materials. I'll take this over wearing plastic clothes any day. So that's there's probably some other examples. But that's what I could think of right now.
What about how to carry the load? I know you have tried many different methods, and in your videos, from packing it on your horse, but also packing up your tarp and everything, and making a bundle and using rope straps, throw that over your shoulders and everything. For your preference, and maybe for someone who's starting out, and this might seem kind of obvious, but we started this episode at the very beginning talking about aesthetics. There's an appeal for historical camping or traditional camping. So sometimes we make sacrifices for that aesthetic. But based off of your experiences, would you do you honestly prefer to take your canvas tarp and a bundle or some other method and using maybe even a historical traditional pack setup? Or do you actually prefer more of like a modern pack setup with either an internal or external frame?
Yeah, that's a good one. So when I did my backpacking, I had a sweet pack. My first pack was good, and then I got a really nice one at the REI yard sale. By the way, we camped out for those, and and so I have respect for those. Like they enabled me to carry that 55 pounds really well. So there's a lot of reason for those packs, and they're very advanced. If you know how to shape them, you can shape it right to your back, and it's got that great waist and the chest hooks. But the thing is, those are wonderful when you're carrying 50 pounds, um, which, as I've already mentioned, for overnight now, I haven't done it with my sleeping bag yet. No, I haven't done it with my sleeping bag yet. I don't know why I didn't, but I think I could do about 20 pounds and have enough food for a few days. So at that point, it's like, well, I don't need that pack. It's overkill. I don't need a whatever they weigh, 5 pounds, 5 pound pack to carry my 20 pounds. Now, however, because I was using wool blankets, when I've tried to do my a pack, it's way too bulky with wool blankets. So if I do it with a sleeping bag, I think that pack design I'm using, where I just pack it in my tarp, would work well if I got good shoulder straps, and then set it up well to tie it around my waist, because that waist support is huge for comfort. Now, that being said, for those who don't know, primarily I set up for horseback, so it's less important. But if I was going to continue going that route of having a solo option, which actually I am working on that, I got an old horse cinch. I've got like 6 of them. And so I grabbed one. It's got a buckle on each end, and then it's this nice wide mohair, and so it's really soft on the shoulder. So I grabbed one of those, and I want to set up a binding system where I can wrap my gear in a tarp with my modern sleeping bag and carry it on my side with that strap over my shoulder, and see how that works. And if it's too heavy, or if I want to go with more weight, then I want to do 2 of them. So yes, I would still, I still want to get the pack down. If people are really into wanting to do it old-fashioned style, though, that don't want to be a little more comfortable, there is that. There's a lot of people who use the baskets. They're shaped like 3 feet by a foot and a half or so. Um, so it's a basket, and it's got straps, and it's a good setup that a lot of people use. So there is that option that apparently is historical. I think that was more of an East Coast thing for those guys.
So, what would be your loadout, your hypothetical loadout for someone who really doesn't have a whole lot of historic stuff, but they're maybe wanting to go in that kind of direction to experience traditional camping, whether it be early 20th or even late 19th century. What kind of suggestions that you would have with modern equivalents, so that they could kind of get the feel and see if they really want to completely commit financially and everything else in that direction?
Yeah, good question. So this pot that I showed you guys, this coffee pot, it's only 15 bucks, and I love the look of it. To me, it's important what I got sitting around. Um, so it's $15. It's lightweight. You can, in my opinion, I prefer to not carry a filter that way, because I got plenty there. I can boil water and then let it cool and drink it. Um, Also, a tin cup is super cool, and you can get these for less than 10 bucks, I think. So the cookware um, is a good one to start with, because that's a big part of your camping experience, is cooking food, and so that's a cheap way to do a lot of it. But then the pans are really expensive, so just get I'd say just a lightweight pan, because I mean, you could carry a small cast iron, but they're so dang heavy. I take that back. If somebody's really committed, there is a later style. I believe they were 1870s. They call them cold handle, because they had a different handle design, but it's still the sheet iron, so it's way lighter than cast iron, and it's not that heavy. And you can find those in antique stores sometimes, or online, and they're still pretty cheap. So a couple items of cook gear, and then minimize. You can just take a spoon. You don't have to have a spoon, fork, and a knife. You should have a knife on you anyway. Just get over the grossness of using it for everything. Because as long as you, all right, I shouldn't be giving safety tips. But anyway, so yeah, coffee pot and a pan and a cup and a spoon. I think that pretty much makes up a cook set. And I guess you would need some kind of a, well, it depends on what food you're taking, but that pretty much covers the bulk of your gear, because if you're not cooking, you're gathering firewood. If you're not gathering firewood or cooking, then you're probably sleeping or setting up your shelter. So a canvas tent is another good one. I would go 9 by 9. I've done the 8 by 7 for a long time. Unless you know it's going to be fair weather, then, or if you're only 5.5 feet tall, that might help too. Then you could do 7 by 8, 7 by 7, which is nice because it cuts down on the weight. But it's kind of hard to get into a canvas tarp really cheap. But a tarp tent is so useful. That might be one that somebody is willing to invest if they're committed to camping. Then a tarp tent can work either way.
Do you really think that a tent is even really necessary for someone who's beginning? Uh, I think people that actually Sarge Vining, he said it in one of the earlier videos that I did that we tend to pack our fears, and I've heard that before, and I think a lot of people feel like they have to have a tent because it's kind of like your fort. It protects you from, the wild bear that's going to come along and gobble you up or something. And out west where you live, honestly, you do have more concerns than what I have here in Ohio because you've got a lot of crazy big animals out west. Here in Ohio, we're just starting to see some bobcats and some black bear, but none of the concerns that you really have. So I guess it kind of depends on regionality. But for the beginning person, do you think a tent is really all that necessary?
Well, yeah. First, I mean, to be clear, when I say tent, I mean a tarp. And we've already talked about um, my, what was I saying? Well, so yes, to me, a tarp is essential because you don't want to get caught out in the rain. Now, that being said, when it's fair weather, I don't even set up a tarp tent. Like if it's getting down into the 30s at night, and if it's dry, it's not a high humidity, then I won't even set it up. I'll just lay it down on the ground because it is good to always have a layer of protection, dampness from the ground to your bed. And then, in the odd chance that it rains, if you're not expecting it, it's easy to fold it over and now you're safe. So that's why, to me, it'd be silly to go without a tent, without a tarp. I mean, but yeah, definitely don't set it up if you don't need to. I mean, I prefer when I don't have to. I like the simplicity. But yeah, I can't imagine anyone going out, especially alone, without a tarp. But I pack my stuff in the tarp, and then like I say, I use it to sit on and sleep on, and to keep that dampness and temperature.
So really, it has multiple uses. Like you said, it's a tarp. It's a square or rectangular cloth, and you can use it for lots of different things. So, and that end, it has multiple uses. All right, so we're at 48 minutes, man. This conversation's been going so great, man. I appreciate everything you're telling us. So I'm gonna stop for a moment and ask some questions and bring up some comments that our viewers are mentioning here. So again, if you have a question for Richard, go ahead and post it, and I'll post it for you to him. That way you can get an answer. But we have Jennifer Harden says hello from Race and Jennifer. Mike R says, great channel. I enjoyed watching the Nesmic experiments.
Oh, cool.
You remember any of those experiments that you had?
Those, I think, are the ones you talked about. They were a big highlight of my camping life, the Nesmith experiments. Those are the ones where I went out that you mentioned. I got down to single digits. Um, Now, I always like to tell people I am not a tough guy when it comes to the cold. There's a meme that goes around. I don't remember how it says, but it's got like somebody dressed up in puffy clothing that's just covering them head to toe. And it says, there's always that one friend. Well, people would send that to me because I was that friend. I was always cold. And so to be able to go out in single digits and survive the night, albeit uncomfortably, but to survive it, is a big deal for me. And so yeah, those Nesmic experiences were experiments were huge. Um, it was helped me, like I said, to break away. That I don't have to go out and camp and prove anything. That just going out and kind of focusing on one aspect, that really helped too. Instead of going out and um, trying to do new cook system, new bed system, new shelter system, I was really focused on shelter in the wind and cold on those. And that's why like somebody commented to me, hey, if you camp up the hill, then you're not down there in the valley where it's coldest. I said, well, I want it to be the coldest because that's my intention for getting out. So, yeah, I appreciate when people enjoy those.
Those are pretty brave videos, that's for sure, man. So Mike, oh wait, Richard Boost. I'm probably going to mess this name up. I think it's Richard Busby. Says, love this episode. He'd like to hear more about actual use of tarps versus various canvas shelters. Example is Nesmic.
Now,
So with
didn't
that,
Ness,
maybe you can give us some of your favorite designs of tarps or shelters, or the ways that you like to lay out your tarps. Maybe even include some options for different weather.
yeah, it's a great subject. And I've, like I said, I've spent the past couple of years really focusing on being as minimal as I can. And now I'm getting to the point where I'm adding a little bit of stuff, but also it's weather dependent. Like right now it's spring, it's been warm, but we're heading into some more temps where it might get down to freezing at night and only 40s in the daytime, that kind of thing. So it would still be nice to have a little bit more of a tarp shelter than um, one tarp. When it warms up, then one tarp is all that I want because, like I said, like we were saying, I probably won't even use it besides just sleeping on top of it. And and if some crazy weather comes in, well, in an emergency, then no problem, I can deal with that. But if it's ongoing, then I'm really leaning toward two different designs. So one is basically the Wheelan because my favorite setup for the tarp is uh, is just slanted like a lean-to, but then I want sides for it, and I'm thinking about making some detachable sides. That way, I can have my main tarp, and then if I want to bring the sides with me for wind protection, then I can just bring them and attach them like with buttons or something. And then in my Nesmic experiments, I usually do have two tarps because when you pack on a horse, you got one pack on each side. Um, I developed that design where I did a plow point one way and a plow point the other way into the wind, and then I connected them to block with wind, and I had fire right in the middle. That actually worked really well, but it was kind of a cumbersome thrown together setup. So what I'd like to get is two sides that would be detachable again, or I could just fasten them with buttons really fast if I want to set them up. Because that one's nice for gear stowage in one, or an animal if they actually sleep in it, and then me in the other, and create better space. So that's two designs. However, my favorite that I'm really leaning to is what I've been doing lately. Um, I think 10 by 10 would be ideal. I've got that 12 by 16, and I might just keep it at that. And that one is just so versatile because I can make it as small as I want. When it's smaller, it reflects heat better. And so, and since I'm using rocks and not stakes, I don't have to have all those tie outs, and I can just make it smaller by setting up the rocks, and then it reflects the heat. Or if I want to do the one pole system that I've been doing, because it's going to rain, a downpour, and I want extra space so I don't get um, so I can bring all my gear in. Um, that's why I just think the 10 by 10 is the ideal at this point. I don't know if I'll actually make one if I'll just use this big one that I've got and use that for a while because then I can do all the setups with it.
I'm gonna bring up a picture because you mentioned the wheel and tent, and the wheel and tent is a very interesting style of tent, and it was made by a military officer. Give me just a second. I'm going to bring it up here, and this is from the Tent Smiths. So as we can see here, this is the wheel and tent. Now, have you ever had an experience sleeping in one of these yourself?
Okay, yeah, now that's, see, I think that has a fly on it over the top. I don't think that's the traditional Wheeland. Um,
Hmm. See if I can find something else.
this picture is it's like a baker tent, except the baker is like 2 or 3 feet off the ground, and then it angles up. So if you take that 2 or 3 feet away, just cut it off. It's like like a muffin top, and take the good part. Where this
Hmm.
one, this is a neat setup, but I don't like that lip at the top.
I know some people. In fact, I think it was Blackie Thomas. He did an experiment where he took two old GI pup tents, the shelter house, and he cut off, I think, one side, but kept the end flaps, which button up together, and that made kind of that same style that I showed you that they call the wheeling. And I've never used one of those, um, but if I was going to use a tarp type tent, I think having the sides closed in one way or the other, especially for rain, would be a positive thing. I'm 6'1", which may not seem all that tall, but on certain tarps, I'm going to get wet. Now you mentioned a 10 by 10, right? And how tall are you? Just
I'm
for
six,
comparison.
yeah, 6 feet.
You're 6 foot. So those of us who are 6 foot, we should get ourselves a 10 by 10. That's good information, a little nugget to know, especially if we want to pursue the type of camping that you do. Um,
But everybody should, because the problem is as soon as it starts raining, if there's a breeze, then all of a sudden you're getting water in there. That's where to me the extra space comes in handy.
Scott Dunkirk said he's done 1870s infantry, World War II, U.S. Army Air Force, living history. The little things are what really push it over the top for the folks you are giving your presentations to. Are there any little things that may not really be necessarily the thing that's prominent in your camping gear that you like to take along, but just gives you a good feeling about living the 1870s lifestyle?
Well, uh, not really, because I kind of figured out along the way that the more that I just don't carry, then the easier it is to do. Because in reenacting, there's no end to the stuff you can buy. And since I
Amen.
don't, and so I figured out, it's not having something is historically correct and it's cheaper. So, I mean, I guess I did start carrying that candle thing, and that's something I don't need, but it was kind of cool to have. I mean, my gun is always my favorite piece. But, I guess also though having things that are well made and like very authentic does make things feel good. Like I don't like having that stainless steel coffee pot, but it's just so practical that on one hand I like it, but as far as reenacting, I don't enjoy having that kind of stuff around.
Right.
So eventually, someday I will get a camp set up where it is totally authentic, and maybe I'll get some fake money by then and really add that extra stuff. I would like to do that, but not as my main thing.
So do you think that you present actually an inaccurate loadout? I say loadout, and I'm not talking about like cotton shirt or anything like that, but I mean just an inaccurate loadout of, say, a cowboy, someone who's living out on the prairie with their horse? Or do you think actually you live a pretty accurate lifestyle?
Live or camp?
Camp. Let's stay with camping.
Uh,
Good question.
yeah. I mean, it's varied. I had a tin coffee pot there for a while, and I've done some camps that were pretty dang close. But I mean, it depends on how accurate a person is. Like for a lot of people would assume that what I've got is correct, but I look
Mhm.
at things like, okay, that rope isn't the right braided design that they would have done back then. Even though it's a non-synthetic rope, it's not the right kind. So stuff
Right.
like that to me. Uh, my clothing isn't up to where I want it. My boots aren't correct, but 99%, not 99, 90% of the people wouldn't know that. But I always mention it so more people are learning.
But
Um,
what about just the gear that you actually take out camping? I'm not talking about, again, like the authentic, but does the average cowboy who's out on the range or maybe traveling from one town to the next town or something, would they really carry a whole lot of stuff anyways? Would they be carrying uh, kerosene lanterns, or would they be carrying a bunch of odds and ends, or would they try to live pretty Spartan?
yeah. Okay. Well, that's kind of neither. So
Okay.
that's an excellent question. Uh, no, there's not a lot of cases of people doing what I'm doing. So I referenced that guy that lived in my valley. He
Mhm.
would take strings up to Canada and up north to miners to supply miners and make money by selling all the. He'd buy stuff in the Dalles, Oregon, and then he'd haul it up, 15, 20 mules in a string and sell it. That was a way to make money back then. Um, Unfortunately, he never says what he camps with. It's very frustrating to me. The best I've got are those examples I gave where he didn't have anything and he just suffered. Those are the ones that make it into the book because they're the interesting stories. The one time that he said anything was that it was a couple decades into it, so there was a train, and he left his camp kit with the one guy, and he went and took the train back. So all I know is that he had a camp kit at one time. What that was composed of, I don't know. Granted, now another example, I've got two accounts, two separate accounts of guys who traveled over the Natchez Pass. It was at the time, it was probably the main pass for thousands of years for the Indians,
Mhm.
but for the white people who settled here, they only used it for a little while until Snoqualmie, our main pass, got opened up. But Natchez Pass posed problems for wagons, as in they had to lower them by rope. But on horseback, it was more doable. Anyway, I've got two first-hand accounts on those trips, and uh, so excited because one or both guys went into detail with what they had, and so that was incredible. One guy even mentioned the color of his blankets, and so eventually someday I want to replicate that because it's the one thing I've got. But I mean, really, okay. Sorry, I got up on. There's other parts that I want to address here. Like Charlie Siringo, he's a guy who did do quite a lot of traveling because of his position in the ranch. Uh, it, it meant he traveled a lot. But in reality, most of these people were a day or two away from a town, and what they would do mostly was just stay at a town. I don't think it was like now. I don't know enough about prices, but like for me to travel and just take a hotel is dang expensive.
Right.
But back then, I think it was like 25 cents or 50 cents for a hotel. maybe it was $1. In other words, I think it was a much smaller percentage of your income. I think that a room, because a lot of times you didn't get a room. Sometimes, depending on where you were and what era, what which time frame, a lot of times they would just push the tables and chairs back in the saloon, and all the guys would just sleep on the floor, and you paid for that. And so there wasn't nearly as much camping as I thought when I got into this. I was inspired by movies, and
Right, right. I think we all are.
yeah, and then you learn the real history, and it's a lot more boring. So I don't know. There's not a lot of examples of guys who actually went and did trips like I do.
That's cool, man. I love that answer. Thank you. Appreciate it. So Alphonse Dente, he says a handful of jerky and a pound of flour ain't going to last long out there. What are the weapons of choice for hunting?
For hunting. We're talking modern day, I take it.
Uh, let's stick with your historical persona.
Well, all right. For the average hunter, um, really muzzleloaders did stay very common for years and years. Like I've got a really cool account that a friend loaned me in the 1880s here in my valley, where there was a Indian scare. They thought there was a scare that the Yakimas, I think it was, were going
Uh
to
huh.
attack. And so all the people got in a frenzy, and they built up a fort really fast by digging. They made a dirt fort. I forget what they had a nickname for it, and it's an excellent read because the gal who wrote it, she was a little girl when it happened, and she describes it, and she actually tells us like what kind of weapons they had. And so even in the 80s, um, muzzleloaders were the primary weapon. I think that the muzzleloading shotgun, in my opinion, is the most common weapon that we found that would have been found out in the frontier. The
Hmm.
stuff that we read about is the guys who were more interesting. That's why they wrote books. We have less books about the guys who just moved out, started farms, and had a shotgun so that they could shoot a rabbit or a grouse when they saw it to supplement dinner. But so the muzzleloading shotgun and muzzleloading rifles stayed in prominence for a long time, way more than we think. Um, Especially the Henry, the repeater rifles were fairly low powered, and so that's what I hunt with. I'm expecting a real cool hunting season this year. I'm going to take my 50 caliber Hawken.
That's cool. Now, based off of your experience sleeping out in your property and up in the mountains and stuff, I know you ran into a couple predators. How important is it out where you live to take some type of firearm or bear spray or something to in case you run into a predator?
Yeah, honestly, I think the best thing is dogs. They speak the language, and what I found from living in the wild like this is most animals aren't really courageous. Not like we think. They all want an advantage, and if they don't have that advantage, which also it goes into it when you read about warfare with the tribes,
Hmm.
they mock a lot of the animal tactics. It's fascinating to read about and learn about. But anyway, that's why like Indians. If going into, I won't go to get into that right now, but I want to do a video on it someday. As far as animals aren't like Americans, where we
Uh-huh.
think that to back down means you're a coward. Animals don't think that way. They want the advantage. If they don't have the advantage, there's no shame to them in backing up. In fact, my dogs will even act like big old sissies when they don't have the advantage. Like courage is a different, it doesn't exist the way that we think of it in the animal world. So basically, knowing that, if you don't have this courage with animals, go out and find somebody with horses and learn. It's very empowering to figure out that you can get horses to move away from you, or cows. That's a good place to start. Um, 1,000-pound beast will run from you if you just behave correctly. Um, and it's the same with predators. I run off coyotes that were attacking my dogs, and I run off. My dog ran off a cougar. A cougar ran off from me. I wouldn't say that I ran him off. It was just my presence, and he couldn't get away fast enough. And so the same with a bear. I saw a bear in the wild 300 yards away, and he saw me and took off up the hill. And so you start to learn this stuff. Um, you can get confidence from working with horses and kind of develop the the behavior needed. I
Right.
almost stopped it 4 years ago. But anyway, but then when you're sleeping, obviously it's a different story. I can't imagine going out. I'm not that brave. I go with dogs, and I don't want to go camping without dogs. So anyway, I could go on and on.
All right. So really, it's not something that people need to worry about. Like we're packing our own fears in general. You're not going to have a mountain lion or a pack of wolves come up on your camp, or a bear in your case.
I don't know. I camp with the dog. Honestly, I'm entertaining the idea of letting a few people come out and camp with me, for the experience. And I think about that because the goal would be a first solo camp. Like that's what motivates me to put this on, because I want to help people get out and do their first solo camp.
Uh
But
huh.
I think that as I'm planning it, I'm like, well, it's kind of, am I being hypocritical? Am I asking them to do something I wouldn't do? Because I'm telling them, your first solo camp, and I'm going to stay here with the dogs. Uh,
Right.
so, I mean, really, just having dogs is huge. I'd rather have dogs with me than a gun. To me, that's more important.
All right. It's good to know, man.
It is important.
Jennifer Harden.
Yeah.
Jennifer Harden said, ask any podcast books you recommend to learn more about the lifestyle that you live.
The lifestyle I live. Okay, Jennifer knows me well enough. I'm going to assume she means my living style rather than my camping style. So, no, there is nothing good that I know. The problem with YouTube, most channels, they make it look like it's either impossible, and I can explain that, or they make it look like it's glamorous, which I think honestly the best resource is Reddit. The problem with Reddit is you're on there all the time. It's hard to um, not get into it more and more, because there's people who talk about simple living on there, and there's
Mm-hmm.
homestead people, and they talk about a lot of the reality. The problem is most people approach this. I won't go into this too much, but most people approach this bringing civilization into the wilderness. And I did it. I started it. It took me a few years to get out of that mindset. So most people, I don't think, get over that mindset. Like, they want all the things that were in town, they want it out here, and that's what makes it difficult, in my
Thank you. Richard Busby says, or asks, any tips for surviving mosquitoes out there using a tarp? That's my problem. I'm with him on that.
opinion. Yeah, that one. I mean, this opens up my style. Just don't go where there's mosquitoes. That's my. I'm so blessed that at both of my properties, I don't have a mosquito problem. I did 1 year because I was irrigating different, and I had water in a pond. But even by the end of July, they were gone. And I planned my mountain trips. I'm not going to go where there's tons of mosquitoes. It's just not worth it. I don't have to. That's kind of the natural living. And that's another difference. Civilization, we want to conquer nature. Natural living, we just go with the flow of nature. But but I don't know how it is in other regions. I know my area. I don't know how it is back there. Maybe you have no choice from May to September.
Yeah, here in eastern woodlands here in Ohio, and I'm sure down in the south, we got mosquitoes that'll carry you away. I will say that historically, in historic books and everything, they actually sold netting, mosquito netting, and you use cheesecloth, or you could use other materials that's very similar to cheesecloth to keep the bugs out. Today, you can actually buy mosquito netting that would cover a cot, and even the historic books, they demonstrate, putting up 4 stakes and tying them up and hanging them from a distance and stuff. And I think there might even be versions where it's more like a teepee, or not a teepee, I'm sorry, like an A-frame. It's a very short A-frame that you can put over yourself. That's just a mosquito net. So that's something that I've been tempted to try, but I haven't. I hate mosquitoes. They ruin my life. At the bane of my existence.
But my problem is that even if I can protect myself from them, my horses are still getting terrorized by them, and I don't want to put my horses through
Yeah.
that.
See. Richard again says, example of wheel intent, a little different than the one displayed earlier. I think there he's just informing us that the wheel intent was he was talking about. And
Oh,
Alphonse Dente says, any fishing or trapping? Do you do any fishing and trapping?
I would love to do trapping. I each year I think about it, but I want to. Fishing, yes. I'm going to try a little harder this year to develop my historical fishing setup, and I have a problem with making things extra difficult for me. But this year I'm gonna make a few allowances to make sure I can actually be successful with the fishing.
Now, what do you tend to take? Do you just take like a little hand line, or are you thinking about doing a pole?
Yes, I just saw this pole style where it was only about that long. So
Uh huh.
you wrap the line around it, and then you cast it, and the line comes off of the stick. So I want to
Hmm.
try that. I don't know if it's historical. Actually, they had actual fishing poles back then,
Yeah.
but that's a simple one that I can just make when I'm out there. And I want to try that casting method. You round it off here, which allows the line to fly off, because the method I've been doing is difficult.
Are you pretty good at fishing generally if you had a modern pole?
Uh, Hit or miss, yeah.
I am not, man. I am not. I'm one of those guys that uses the excuse, well, that's why they call it fishing and not catching.
Yes, I bet.
I love it, but does not love me. All right. Richard says, classic answer, don't go where there are mosquitoes. So he's laughing at you. He's enjoying that comment that you made. All right.
I,
So
I,
that puts, go
I
ahead,
have
buddy.
an I have an extra benefit too that I didn't expect. Like my lifestyle is so close to camping to begin with that that need to get out and camp, which is very real, I don't have anymore because I kind of just live it mostly. And so I sympathize with people who need to get out and camp and don't have any choice but to go where there's mosquitoes. They don't necessarily have that free have that I have.
So that brings me up two questions I have. Those of you who don't know, Richard's actually a comedian as well. He goes on the road and he's a comic and he's pretty good at it too. You posted at one point where they were giving you a hotel and you decided to not use the hotel because you prefer more of a Spartan lifestyle. Why is that? What
I
happened?
I also didn't take the free steak dinner either.
Oh my gosh, that's a sin. All right, we're no longer friends, Richard.
Well, when you live the natural life, you're really living, and and it really like it's more like a frog in the water. I didn't know it until you go back to civilization. The food is bland. They raise food for profit, not for taste.
Right.
And so you're eating this food. I'm very against commercial um, food industry and the commercial meat industry. I've tasted like people tend to say you don't eat ram, you don't eat bull, but these grass-fed animals that are living a good life out in the pasture with other animals, they're living a good life. They're eating grass. They taste amazing.
It
Um,
does. You're
yeah,
right,
and
man.
so why do I want to? These days, I eat so little food. I don't want to put food that's not the best in my body, and so it just had no appeal to me. Oh yeah, and then with the hotel, it's like my dogs are outside because I didn't want to pay $35 each to bring them in, and there's no airflow. Um, the mattress, I like my mattress. I like my pillow, even though I brought my pillows in. I like my down comforters. Like all that stuff is designed for profit. Like the hotel can't buy nice stuff because
Right.
then it wears out and then they got to keep replacing it. And so why do I want to go in and spend an uncomfortable night when I've got what I love right outside? So,
That's pretty cool. All right. So the second
not what.
question I have the second question I have from your previous comment was, has your life, the way you're living it and everything, has it kind of actually ruined the taste of camping for you? Or is it just an extension?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. Yeah, it kind of has because I love where I am. I go out. I got to the point in my life when I was younger, like in my teens, we would go do reenacting. I didn't care if I was sleeping on the ground. I loved it, in fact, because the more rigorous I could make my life, the more I felt like I was living up to my forefathers.
Right.
But now, yeah, now I'm at this place where I want a good night's sleep, and it makes a difference. And so my mattress is super comfortable. I've got my two feather down comforters. I mean, guys, get down comforters. Your life will change. You can get them for 25, $50 on Marketplace, and there's nothing like them. And so I go out camping. It used to be camping, you get away in nature, and you're like, oh, I don't want to leave, and I want to go back.
Right,
And
right.
now, yeah, like, well, why am I doing that when my horses, my dogs, and me would all be more happy back home?
Does any of that have to do with age, you think?
Yeah, that's the question. Funny, but because there is still there's a little bit of that desire to get out and see what's around the corner, around the bend. And I hope to do that this year. I want to go out a week just right off my property and then see if some of that adventure comes back to me.
I hope it does. All right, so we're wrapping up here. Mark says hello from Mark in Texas. How you doing, Mark? He's a member of the guild. And we have Alphonse Dente. He says about that weird fishing stick talked about before. K-Bar still makes it. It's made of Glock plastic now, so you may have to copy it with wood.
Uh, no doubt K-Bar does, but the one that I saw, it was advertised like on Instagram, and it's wood. It was a wood design. So I grabbed a photo of it, and it's a simple design.
Nice, nice. All right, that's an almost an hour and a half. Thanks to everybody who stuck with us this long, or an hour and a half. We usually try to keep these things at an hour. And Richard, I appreciate you giving us your time, man, for us to pick your brain. I know out where you live, it looks like it's still sunshine out where you live.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sunnier now.
it is 9:39 where I live here in Ohio, so it is. We got the moon peaking. It's funny how the world works, and it's awesome that we can do this in today's society with today's technology, man.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you coming on and talking to us about your experiences. You've given us some really good nuggets of information. And those of you who are unfamiliar with Over on the Wild Side, check out his YouTube channel. He's got a lot of great videos on there. The guy, well, walks the walk, talks the talk, and he's very honest. Yeah, as Richard says, there's a lot of YouTubers out there uh, who they portray something, but it's not really the reality. It's been doctored up and everything. But Richard's very honest. If he doesn't sleep out overnight in negative degree, yeah, he tells you. He's like, no, I'm not stupid. I'm not going to kill myself for you two, and nor would I. Nor would I. So if you want somebody with some integrity, uh, go check that out. He's got some really, really good stuff. He's also a comic, so make sure to check out Richard Harleman and check out some of his shows and stuff. He's making the rounds and everything. Now he's getting offered steak dinners and hotels, so you know he's moving on up. So you get to check him out early, and you can say that you saw him at the beginning. Um, oh, there's a few more comments here. LD's Pocket Knives says, hello from New Zealand. Great show. I'm new to both your channels and he'll be back again. Well, thank you, man. We appreciate that. Richard says, thank you both over the wild side and all outfitters, Mr. Dyer's Musings. Richard, do you have any last words before we wish them all good night?
Uh, Richard Bisbee, go and like my Substack post. I'm starting to write about the difference of mindset that I have now versus civilization, and that's on Substack. So I like to talk about that. Everything that I do is over on the wild side. So if you want to find me on Instagram or Facebook um, or YouTube, it's all over on the wild side. So there, that's what I wanted to say.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much again. Make sure to check out the Traditional Camp Crafters Guild because we have these bi weekly live roundtables where we have the opportunity for you guys to ask questions and stuff, and some other events and things that's just exclusive for the Camp Crafters Guild. So, Richard, I thank you so much for doing this for us. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Give a kiss and hug to your loved ones, and we will talk to you guys later. Take care.